Hello everyone and welcome to Inside Number 23, my little part of the internet where you can have a little glimpse into my handmade life. I'm coming to you from Hertfordshire and I live here with my husband Emrys, our lovely pug Rolly and my daughter Posy. Thank you so much for joining me on this rather new and revamped episode of Inside Number 23. It's been a little while. I was on a hiatus after having my daughter, but now I am back with a vengeance and I'm so excited to start this new format and basically show you a little bit of what I have been up to, what I've been making, what I've been just doing with my life in general, and I have some really fun things to talk to you about today. I really have three main projects to share with you in this episode. January has been interesting because I managed to finish all of my languishing whips before the end of 2019, which basically left me with a bit of a blank slate for 2020 going forward. So I'm trying to be a little bit more conscious of the type of things that I'm crafting, how I'm crafting, and so far it's been really satisfying and I've been very happy. So I think we should just jump straight in with my first project, which is pretty much almost a finished object. I am not wearing it today because it's not finished, but it's pretty much as close to being finished as you can get. There's one last process that I need to complete on it, which I'm hoping I will be able to get done today, but let me show you what I'm talking about. This is my Vellum cardigan. Oh, it's so gorgeous, don't you just love it? I'm so happy with how this has turned out. I told a little mini fib just now. I did manage to finish all of my languishing whips before the end of 2019. This was a cheeky little cast on that got started at the end of 2019 and obviously is nearly finished, but this was my Boxing Day cast on. I know that there's a real trend for Christmas Eve cast-ons that's been going on for a little while. I think that Danny of Little Bobbins was the first person to kind of instigate the Christmas Eve cast-on. And it's something that for years I've wanted to try, and for whatever reason it wasn't working for me. Casting something on Christmas Eve just never seemed to be a plausible thing. And I've realised why. It's because I get so wound up before Christmas. I like making gifts and doing special things and organising everything, that my brain is not in the right place to switch off on Christmas Eve. I still find that I have so many things to think about that I can't kind of just allow myself to indulge in that one project then. Maybe I should do, but this year I decided to treat myself to a Boxing Day cast on. So after all of the excitement and the organisation and everything of Christmas had kind of died down on the 26th of December, I decided this is a bit of time for me. I'm going to cast on something that I particularly want to do, and it ended up being the Vellum cardigan. Now this cardigan, which is a colourwork yoke cardigan, as you can see here, is by Carrie Westerman. It's from her book This Thing of Paper. It has this beautiful colourwork yoke, like I said, but it also has a touch of colourwork on the edge of the sleeve as well. And it's a really gorgeous pattern. I loved working on this, and it actually didn't take me very long to finish the knitting on it at all. It kind of flew off the needles. I was very happy with it. Now this project is written originally for DK weight yarn, and I decided that I was going to use a combination that I know that quite a few other podcasters have used. My friend Amy from the Stranded podcast and my friend Ellie from Skein Deer Knits, she uses this yarn a lot. They both use this yarn. This is Holst Garn Super Soft, which is a light fingering weight yarn. So basically I held it double for this cardigan, and after swatching it just created the most lovely fabric. So this is Holst Garn Super Soft held double. The colours that I used, this main red beautiful burgundy, which I absolutely love, is Bokhara. Then in terms of the colour work, the black colour is Oxford, the off-white is almond, and this lovely kind of pale greeny blue is spring. And this yarn is relatively inexpensive. It's very, very good value for money, but I also purchased this in the Black Friday sale in 2018. So all in all, for a sweater's quantity, it was a real bargain, and I will definitely be purchasing some again, particularly to do colour work, because it has a really nice grip to it. So it was great for my lovely colour work yoke, which you can see here. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Fun thing about this cardigan in particular is that it was knit in the round in one piece, and then it was steeked. And while I was working on this, I had so many comments from different people about steeking. And I must admit, it has been a little while since I have steeked a project, a good few years since I have. And I'm not usually apprehensive about steeking. It's something that I've done a couple of times in the past, but I did feel a little bit nervy in my preparation for the steek, which, in case you don't know what a steek is, it's when you knit something complete in the round and then you cut up the front of your knitting. That's called steeking, and the section that you cut is the steek. All very good words to know. And essentially you can create a cardigan, so something that opens at the front like this now does, from something that was knit all in one piece. It's a really lovely technique to use because it means that you don't have to worry about purling when you're doing colour work like this. So I could knit this colour work, and I just show you my floats as well because I'm very proud of them. Yes, they're very pretty. But you knit this entirely in the round, so you're just knitting, never having to worry about purling, so it's a little bit speedier, and in general I find that it gives my tension a much more consistent feel, because when I'm purling on colour work things get a little bit lumpy. So I was very happy to do the steek. As I said, I felt a little bit apprehensive, but in the end it's just knitting, and it's just cutting your knitting. So I decided that for this particular project, when I did the steeking, I would do that on camera for you, just so anyone who has any apprehension about steeking, you can have that just thrown to one side. I hope that you enjoy this little bit of footage that I have put together for you. And yes, this is a little bit of the gentle art of steeking.
Hello and welcome to the gentle art of steeking. I'm going to be cutting my knitting with you today. Are you excited? You absolutely should be. As you can see, I've finished knitting the whole of my cardigan now, and I'm going to be cutting down the central steek. So I'm turning this sweater into a cardigan. Now there's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to steeking. As you can see, I have reinforced this central seam. I have chosen to hand stitch down each side of the steek. So when I cut it, it's not going to be going anywhere. So let's take a look at how I've reinforced this steek in a little bit more detail, shall we? My preferred technique for reinforcing a steek is to hand stitch 2 rows of stitches on either side of the steek. So as you can see here, I have 1 row of a running stitch and 1 row of a back stitch, which is the darker line that you can see towards the center of the steek. And this just means that it's going to be extra strong when it comes to cutting. Here is the inside of my cardigan, and you can see again where I've hand stitched on either side of the steek that I'm going to cut. Also, in terms of yarn management, I've woven in all of my ends away from the steek. So basically away from the area that I am now going to cut. There are quite a few different ways to reinforce a steek. You can hand stitch as I've done. I've seen crochet finishing techniques. Some people choose to sew the steek on their sewing machine for reinforcement, and some people don't reinforce at all. My advice would just be find a technique that works for you, that is going to allow you to cut with confidence. Once you've done your prep work, the only thing really left to do is cut. So first and foremost, we're going to need an appropriate tool for the job. I have quite a few different kinds of fabric scissors that I like to use. These are some of my favourites, but they're a bit large and unwieldy. So when it comes to steeking, I like something a little bit smaller for this kind of detailed work. These smaller tailoring scissors are pretty much perfect for steeking. They're nice and sharp, but small enough to be able to give you real control on this rather intricate process. So here we go, getting ready to cut the steek. Really the only thing that you need to worry about when you're cutting a steek is not to cut through both layers of your knitting. That's why I am putting my hand inside the cardigan to make sure I don't accidentally cut through too many layers. Here we go. I feel like I should sing the first cut is the deepest, but there you have it, the start of the steek. There we have it, a freshly cut steek. That wasn't half as scary as you thought it would be now, was it? What was once a sweater is now a cardigan that's all ready to be finished. You can see here that my reinforcement stitches are holding up really nicely, and there isn't even the slightest bit of a chance that this is going to unravel anytime soon. I hope you've enjoyed this gentle art of steeking, and that this gives you the confidence to go forth and cut your own knitting.
The reason that I said that this project is not completely finished yet is that although it looks very finished from a quick glance, it's even got some buttons on the front, as you can see here. I haven't done the last bit of kind of finer, detailed finishing work that I like to do with all of my cardigans. So I'm just going to kind of briefly show you the inside of my cardigan so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to start off with the button band of the cardigan, and here is the inside. So on both sides I decided that I would add ribbon across my steek. So as you can see here, this lovely ribbon, so it's kind of a natural colour with off-white crosses and a black line, is covering the raw end of my steek. So underneath here is where all of my little loose ends are now very gently tucked away. It's not something that's completely necessary with a steek, because obviously after you've reinforced those stitches they are nice and secure. I just really like how it looks. And I love adding little details like this into my knitting. So that's what I've done on both sides. And on my button band, I have, on the opposite side, you can see here, sewn in some burgundy grosgrain ribbon. to reinforce the button band. I really like doing this because I find that with a lot of my cardigans, my button bands stretch out quite badly because I use them quite a lot. So this gives more structure to your button band to prevent it from stretching. And then on top of that, I've sewn on these lovely buttons. These buttons and the ribbon that I used for my steeks, to cover my steeks, was purchased. They were both purchased from Textile Garden, and I love them. These are black shell buttons and they are so pretty. The burgundy ribbon I just picked up at my local John Lewis, so that was easy. But if I show you my buttonhole band, you'll see what is missing. So on here I already have sewn in my steek ribbon, so that's all sewn in, but as you can see, my buttonhole band is just knitted. So some people would call this kind of jobs are good and think that this is completed. And to be honest, with a lot of my previous cardigans, I just reinforced the button band as opposed to the buttonhole band with ribbon. However, what I found to happen in those instances is that my button band with the button sewn onto it would be lovely and maintain its shape, but unfortunately the buttonhole band would start to get very, very stretched. And to be honest, out of the two, this is the one that's going to get more wear and tear, because this is the one that you're buttoning on and buttoning off when you're wearing your garment. So what I now tend to do is to take a piece of grosgrain ribbon and use my sewing machine on the ribbon separately. I will measure where all of these buttonholes are, and I will sew buttonholes into my grosgrain ribbon that match the ones that are on the buttonhole band here, so that when I then take that piece of ribbon and stitch it to the wrong side of this buttonhole band, I will be able to use the buttonhole that's on the ribbon with the buttonhole on the buttonhole band to put the button through. That's probably as clear as mud, but I hope you get the general gist of what I'm trying to say. This is the one final touch that I have to add to this cardigan before I can call it finished. It's a little bit fiddly because you have to use the sewing machine before you hand stitch the ribbon, but once that is done, this will be completely done. It will be my first finished garment of 2020, and I'm just really, really happy with it so far. So fingers crossed, next time I see you, I may be wearing this. But yeah, that is my Vellum cardigan by Carrie Westerman. And for my first project of this year, I'm particularly thrilled with it. I mentioned how I'm trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about what projects I make and when this year. And what I mean by that is I have, as you can see behind me, here and here, lots of stash to work through. That is a big priority for me. I would ideally like to knit through all the sweater quantities that I currently have in stash this year. I don't think there's that many left because I did knit through a fair few last year as well. I think I've maybe got 4 or 5. But the fact of the matter is I have a lot of yarn that's been sitting around for a long time, and I would like to use it, get it out into the world, into beautiful garments, and you know, just set the yarn free the yarn, as it were. But also, something that I have noticed over the past year is that I'm being much more conscious of what I integrate into my own wardrobe. I have a lot of lovely clothes that I have made over the years that are really kind of near and dear to my heart, that I love to wear, that I wear a lot. And so my need for new clothes isn't massive. But I still have a very big need to create things in order to be happy. Making clothes, knitting things, sewing things brings me a lot of joy. And I've reached that point in my life where up until maybe a few years ago, I pretty much purely made things just for myself. And I've realised the way forward is actually to not just do that and to start thinking about making more things for other people. I know that this is not some big revelation that's brand new to everybody, but it was certainly new for me. And this has been something that's kind of been instigated by the birth of my daughter, who is by far the most knit-worthy person that I know. And she really does enjoy me kind of knitting on things. She loves playing with yarn. She likes wearing the things that I make her, or at least she's not at an age where she can tell me that she doesn't like it yet. So all of those things are very positive, for meaning that I want to make more things for her. But also some of the very kind of treasured members of my family who I would like to have an expression of my love for them. I would like to make more things for them in general. This past Christmas I made a lot of handmade gifts, something that I haven't done for years, and it was just such a lovely thing to do, and I want to continue. So, long story short, I have decided, particularly with my knitting, to cast on something for myself that I've planned and that I know is going to work for me. And then for the project after that, I'm going to knit something for someone else. So basically, my newest cast on is something for Posy. Most knit-worthy little girl that I know. I'm biased because she is my little girl. I had some yarn left over from a Christmas present that I made her this year. That Christmas present was so much fun to make. It was a rainbow crochet blanket that I crocheted using a 20mm hook and I think 6 different strands of worsted weight yarn held together. So it's a bit of a beast, but Posy loves it. But I did have quite a few skeins of yarn left over from that project. And I decided to cast on something nice and quick and simple in quite stark contrast to the Vellum cardigan, which obviously colour work requires quite a bit of thought. I wanted something a little bit more free and easy. So I cast on this. This is the Flax Sweater by Tin Can Knits. I haven't done the garter stitch detail on the sleeve. I decided to keep that just in stockinette stitch. But as you can see, I've done my own kind of little rainbow with lots of different colours of Drops Charisma, and I really love how this looks. This is very much my kind of rainbow. There's lots of nice autumnal colours in here which I really love, but it's a little bit of a kind of non-conventional rainbow, which I think is lovely. This is my first time knitting the flax sweater. I have knit the flax light in the past, but I'm really loving how quickly this is knitting up. Obviously, worsted weight sweater for someone who is very teeny is going to work up relatively quickly. I went for the size 2 to 4 years. Posy is not 2 to 4 years old just yet. She just turned 1 in November, but I wanted to do something that had a little bit more growing room in it. I'm trying to kind of build up her wardrobe for future usage because I find as quickly as I knit things, she does tend to grow out of them. So I have gone down the path of doing something a little bit bigger for her. But this has been such a lovely project to knit on. It's completely mindless and I really love it. I think she's going to love it as well. She really enjoys playing with all of these different colourful skeins of yarn when I've been working on this. So it's been bringing her a lot of pleasure and me a lot of pleasure. And it will be really exciting to have this tucked away in her wardrobe, probably for next winter at this point. But it's lovely because it's a nice project that I've been enjoying for someone who obviously means a great deal to me. and it's using up stash, getting it out in the world, and it's just fun. It makes me smile. So yes, my flax sweater by Tin Can Knits. Huzzah. The last project that I wanted to talk to you about this episode is kind of an anti-project rather than being a project, because essentially I have been spending a lot of time this month undoing a rather mammoth project, which you may have heard me talking about on Instagram. I did do a post about this, but I wanted to talk about it here because I sometimes think that we focus so much on making new things constantly, creating new things. I know that's something that I have definitely been guilty of in the past, that we don't often take a step back and look at the things that we've made previously and reassess them. That's definitely something that I want to do for this year going forward, is to be, like I've said, very mindful about what I'm making, about what works for me, and if something doesn't work for me, to either pass it on to somebody else. I have been doing lots of gifting of knitted items, which has been so satisfying, I can't even tell you. It's lovely that some of my old knitted items are getting a new lease of life in a new home. But also, if I really don't think that something has worked, is there a way that I can fix it? Or, in this case, frog it. One of my largest projects that I finished during my time away from the podcast is a beautiful, very heavily cabled, textured cardigan by the incredible designer Michelle Wong. This cardigan was the Row cardigan, and I knit it out of Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, and oh my goodness, it just was the most beautiful thing. I absolutely loved working on it. The pattern was exquisite. If you've ever knit on one of Michelle's very kind of heavily cabled patterns, you'll understand. It was incredible. It made my brain work. It satisfied my love for cables. I am a bit of a cabling fanatic. And it was amazing to have such a large quantity of yarn out of my stash and into the garment that I'd always intended it to be. I finished this a little while after I'd had Posy, so I must admit at that time, physically, I wasn't feeling at my best. After having her, I think a lot of people experience this once they've had a baby. My body was all over the place for quite a long time. It's definitely settled down now. I'm not saying that it's not changing, but it's slowed down considerably since Posy's turned 1. But at this time, it was still kind of early on in my postpartum process physically. And the first time that I tried on this cardigan, I was really disappointed. It felt massively big on me, more oversized than I had ever intended it to be. It is an oversized cardigan, but it was oversized to the point of making me feel a bit like I was wearing a gorilla suit. This was exacerbated by the fact that somehow, even though my swatch had been spot on perfect after blocking everything, my sleeves were almost 5 inches too long. And I like a long sleeve, you know, I've got quite long hands, I've got long arms, I do tend to knit my sleeves a little bit longer, so I am not scared of a long sleeve. But these sleeves were kind of finishing, I'm talking about this length. And they had been started at the cuff and knit up to the shoulder because this was a cardigan knit in pieces. And they had had a tubular bind on. So I tried rolling them up, but then they were just really bulky because this is a heavily textured garment with thick yarn, and it just looked wrong. It also had this beautiful kind of shawl collar, which was knit double the length, fold it over, and then I think you do a 3-needle bind off in order to connect it on the inside. Can't remember exactly, so don't quote me on that, but it never sat right on me. I have quite narrow shoulders, as you can see even with this sweater. My shoulders finish here, and this is where the shoulder finishes on the pattern. So it's something that I usually don't worry about too much, because I can kind of get away with it. I can hide it a little bit, depending on what I'm wearing. But with something this massive, it really, really stood out that this cardigan was falling off my shoulders. And to be honest, the fact that I am quite narrow-shouldered may have been partly why the sleeves came out so long, thinking about it now. Basically, there were certain things that I could have done in order to fix this right away. I could have, cut the sleeves and re-knit them, but because of that tubular cast on, I just really didn't want to get into that, undoing the sleeve and changing it after all of the work that I'd done. Knitting that collar had taken me so many hours that the idea of undoing it to try and correct things just made me feel so exhausted. So basically, into the cupboard it went, and into the cupboard it sat for the next year. I tried it on at regular intervals because I do think it's a very good idea to keep trying things on and seeing if they work for you. So something I like to do sometimes is try on, a sweater or a cardigan or whatever with a completely different outfit than I would usually do, because often you can find new combinations that you wouldn't even have expected, which can be really, really fun and satisfying. But unfortunately, with the row cardigan, every time I tried it on, I just felt sad, really sad, disappointed in myself that I hadn't spotted the flaws in how it fit me earlier so that I could do something about them kind of practically when I was making the cardigan itself, but also really sad about the amount of yarn that was in this project that was now being wasted, because Brooklyn tweed shelter is relatively high-end cost anyway, but to get it in the UK I have to pay even a little bit more because obviously it's imported from the US, and it had been I think a birthday gift from my mum a few years ago, and I was just devastated that it had been wasted. I didn't want to make any rash decisions. I know some people think that I go a bit crazy with my knitting and make very, very intense decisions about ripping things out very quickly. This really was a long time coming, and I sat with this project for, like I said, almost a year before I did anything. And with this feeling of starting this year in a better place, being more mindful, being more thoughtful about my projects, I just knew that one of the first things that I would want to tackle would be frogging my row cardigan. Now, for a project this massive, frogging it is no mean feat. Although it is a lot faster than knitting it originally, I would say. It took me a good few evenings of just sitting, unpicking, very delicately undoing stitching, because this cardigan is constructed in pieces. It is then seamed together and then you knit the collar on afterwards. So it was a bit of an operation, I would say, frogging it back. I had to perform surgery on this sweater, essentially, and it did take quite a long time. And I also have a particular process with the way that I like to treat my yarn when I frog back. So first and foremost, when I'm frogging something, I will just frog it back into lots of balls. So it's one of the smallest ones. I would say I think I saved about 99% of the yarn of the sweater. When you're frogging back a big project like this, particularly one that's been seamed, some of the yarn does get sacrificed a little bit because you can't help it. Sometimes things get a little bit damaged in the process of frogging back, but I was really, really pleased with the fact that I did save the majority of the yarn. But there are a couple of teeny little balls like this that only came off in a small quantity, kind of at the ends of pieces and that type of thing. But there's a very small amount of them. But after frogging back into balls, I then wind each of those skeins, balls into skeins using my Swift. So I have a large selection of different size skeins of yarn, some very small, like I said, little mini skeins, some kind of middle-sized, and then some considerably larger. But all of these, it's a little bit difficult to see because obviously they've been skeined up, but the yarn in the skein is still very, very crinkly. So this is fresh out of the sweater, fresh out of the cardigan. I just don't like to keep it in the balls because I feel like that puts a little bit too much pressure on the yarn, because I do wind those quite tightly. So all of the yarn has been skeined like this. So far, this process, if you're keeping score, undoing the sweater, ripping back the yarn into balls, taking each one of those balls and skeining it up. The next thing that I like to do, which isn't a necessity, I would say, part of frogging something back, it's just my personal preference, is what I've now done with these larger skeins of yarn. These all had a lovely bath with some really nice smelling soap, so they all smell lovely, in order to relax the yarn back. So what you may be able to see from these is that the yarn in the skeins is no longer kind of crinkly as it was when it came out of the cardigan. It's relaxed back to its kind of, not its original state, because it couldn't be, because it's been knit into a cardigan and frogged, but as close to that as it could be. It's nice and relaxed, which basically means that when I knit this into a new project, I will be working with yarn kind of as it was when I bought it, not all crinkly like super noodles. That's always what it reminds me of when it comes out of the cardigan. I've only done a small portion of the soaking and the drying and the reskeining, and that is because there's so much yarn. I currently don't have the space in my house because we have a 1-year-old who requires a lot of laundry done on a regular basis. I don't have space to have it all dry at once, unfortunately, so it is a bit of an ongoing process. But I definitely have enough washed and skeined ready to start thinking about my next project, which is very exciting. I feel so happy that this yarn has come back to me, because I loved it when I first was given it, and I loved working on it when I knit it into my row cardigan, and now it's back to me again, and I'm just going to be a lot more thoughtful about the type of project that I make it into. I think I have made my decision as to what this is now going to grow up to be. I think it's going to be a weekender by Andrea Mowry, in very, very stark contrast to its original form in the row cardigan, something very complex and heavy and intensive. I want this yarn to be a project that's a little bit more simple, that has a feeling of ease, and that is something that I can wear very, very regularly. I don't want to be in a similar position knitting this into something that I'm not really going to wear, or that's only ever going to be worn every so often. I want it to be in regular rotation because I really, really love it. It makes me happy, and I think in a way this was what it was always supposed to be. I do have a lot of this yarn left, so I don't think all of it's going to go into the weekender, but hopefully I will have enough left over to make something nice for Posy, maybe a little matching sweater. That would be really, really cute, but we shall see. That is everything that I have for you this month. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of my long-term viewers for waiting for me to get everything together so that I could be back with you having lovely chats on a semi-regular basis. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I have absolutely loved being back with you. I can't even tell you. To anyone that this is your first time visiting, thank you for coming and dipping your toe into the world of Inside number 23. I shall be uploading another video at the end of February to let you know what I get up to next month. So if you've enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, and if you want to be updated as to when we have videos on this channel, please hit the subscribe button and then you will be notified when there is a new video here. Thank you all so much for coming to spend some time with me today. I hope that you all have a wonderful month until I speak to you again. Happy crafting. Bye!
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Inside Number 23. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find my personal account as Miss Lavelli, and the specific podcast Instagram is inside.number.23. If you want more details of all my knitted items, you can find me as Miss Lavelli on Ravelry. See you soon!